Hi YouTube, it's your friend Jeff, and I'm coming to you today with a sketchbook tour for my first ever sketchbook. I was drawing in this from May of 2022 all the way to March of 2023, and I thought it'd be fun to go through and show you all. I'm going to tell some little stories along the way and kind of show my progress. I hope you enjoy. Alright, fit check first of all. How are we feeling? Hi, friend. All right, folks, we're going to get started going through this sketchbook here. I hope you grab some coffee for the videos. You can see I've already had mine. We're just going to get right into it. So I actually got this sketchbook and a whole bunch of pens from my girlfriend's dad as he was preparing to move to Vietnam. And we were out in Wyoming helping him pack up his stuff and move. So he just gifted me all of these art supplies because he didn't have anything to do with them. And I figured it was, my responsibility almost at that point to put them to good use. So that was how I kind of got started on my current art journey. And this is my first drawing here. I remember being really nervous about starting this sketchbook, and the first page specifically just, it felt like a whole book of possibilities, and I really didn't want to mess up on the first page, so I played it really safe with some easygoing squiggly designs. And I think this is an okay drawing, but I think that's kind of a silly philosophy to have, learning any new skill, there's going to be challenges, and you're not going to be great at it right away. Moving on to the next page, we've got this kind of squiggly doodle here that's pretty representative of a style I still draw in a lot. And I just, I don't think this is a particularly great example of it. This is pretty messy, and there's no real direction for it, but I think it kind of fits my overall philosophy for kind of doodly pages like this, which is if you're not liking the way it's going, just keep adding more, add more designs, more texture, more outlines, and at a certain point you just get so much stuff on the page that it just is kind of interesting to look at. This big fish here I actually quite like. This was when I was still in Wyoming, helping my girlfriend's dad move, and we were all watching this movie Big Fish together, which I think is a Tom Hanks movie. Has nothing to do with fish, but I actually quite like this. I think this turned out pretty well. Moving on here, we've got a portrait of Mr. Clean, which I actually think turned out really well. I was always a doodler growing up, so I took some art classes just at school in middle school. But I remember learning the basics of how to draw a face and the kind of basic proportions of it. I feel like I definitely used that to good effect here of having a pretty decent drawing of Mr. Clean. Moving on, I've got a drawing I did here of Law from One Piece. You're going to see a lot of anime in this sketchbook. I apologize in advance if that's not your thing. But I think at this point I was, one of my main inspirations for getting into drawing and getting into art was the media that I consumed. And at this time I was really into reading manga, particularly One Piece. And I was just so inspired by the art in it that I wanted to replicate it and then create art like that of my own. So I started here with a picture of Law, which I think actually looks really good for the most part. But this was definitely copying from a reference, and I remember meticulously planning out all of these lines and, acting like my life depended on getting every little stroke right. So even though I think it turned out okay, just like the amount of time I spent on it for a relatively simple drawing makes it a little less impressive in retrospect. Looking at this picture, this was supposed to be a self-portrait. Which I would like to think I'm not quite this ugly. I might not be Brad Pitt, but I don't think I look like this either. I do think, whatever brush pen I was using at the time did give kind of some interesting style to it. But yeah, these eyes in particular are kind of haunting. I've got a nice, just kind of doodly page here. I remember this was supposed to be some kind of like futuristic city skyline here. It got morphed into just random doodles all around. I think this page here is kind of funny because you'll see a lot in this early sketchbook of me copying directly from reference of art that I like, and also some where I'm trying to go based on memory. So this was me trying to draw Zorro from One Piece just with my brain and my pen, and as you can see, it did not turn out great. So I drew Kakashi looking at a panel from Naruto after, and you can see one clearly looks a lot better than the other, but, I think I've gotten better at not needing to rely quite so heavily on looking at a reference in the future. I've got a nice little drawing of Denji there from Chainsaw Man. And we've got some more Chainsaw Man on this page. There'll be a lot of that as well. Decent drawing, definitely unfinished. I've got another face here that I actually quite like. I think she turned out looking pretty okay here. And I remember I was planning on doing some kind of, like kind of a comic thought bubble up here and having a big scribbly doodle in here, but I just never felt particularly inspired to keep working on this page, so I kind of let go of it. Looking at this next page, I don't exactly remember what Naruto character this is, but he's a ninja, and I remember really loving the way that the line art was coming together in this piece. I was definitely copying from a reference, but I remember being really happy with how confident some of these lines looked and some of the hatching and details. But I think I got a little bit overwhelmed of feeling like I was going to mess this up, so I ended up kind of leaving it half finished, and, I wish I would have just gone in with the pens and let fate do what it will instead of giving up on it, but, it was a pretty decent start. I like this drawing a lot because it's kind of a captured moment in time. We can see it's June of 2022 here. And this was me in the passenger seat driving back from Wyoming. I was in my girlfriend's dad's car, which was like a beat up old Jeep. You can see a super cracked windshield here. But yeah, just a good memory, a good, I think a pretty decent perspective of the car and what I was looking at. So pretty happy with that drawing still. Looking forward, I've got some Chainsaw Man drawings all in a row. I really loved that series, especially at the time, and I really love the artist, Fujimoto, his kind of sketchy style, so I remember these drawings were definitely still looking at a reference, but I remember these, I went in straight with pen and not laying down a pencil base layer first, so I think that Denji here turned out pretty okay, and on the flip side I've got his kind of Chainsaw Man form and really messy and blood splattery, which is kind of cool, fitting for the story. And really this is all credit to Fujimoto and his great character design, but I think I was able to capture an element of it there. And I've got another Chainsaw Man character here. I really like what I did with this kind of bordering around. I think that's kind of interesting. But looking at a couple of the details, the hand here is definitely a little bit funky. The neck's a little bit funky. But overall, pretty happy with that. Looking at this next page, again, you can clearly see the difference between something where I was, relying on a reference, trying to meticulously copy it, to things I was just drawing from my own imagination. We've got Luffy here from One Piece, definitely looking like some Temu knockoff version, and some kind of cowboy, zombie, Frankenstein type creation. Kind of interesting. This is a drawing of the main character in Fire Punch, which is the same manga author who wrote Chainsaw Man. Really great series, really disturbing. And yeah, this sketch definitely displays that, but I really like how the eyes came out and kind of the intense contrast here between the black and the white, I think is pretty interesting. Okay, next up we've got a little sketch of Sanji and Zoro from One Piece, two of my favorites. I live in Portland, Oregon, and I was sitting at a park in the middle of summertime under a big tree, just sketching these guys out, and it's just a nice memory associated to it, you know, some pretty simple drawings, but they turned out okay. This is one of my favorite pages in this early sketchbook. This is Guts from Berserk, and if any of you are familiar with Berserk, Miura, the manga author, has really excellent line work. He's just so inspiring to me, so I felt really proud that I was able to kind of, you know, try and replicate his style in a way that made it look like him, even though this is a good bit messier. But yeah, I think this turned out pretty well, a couple kind of funky elements to it, but so really happy with this drawing at the time, and this is another one I did just in pen without a pencil base layer, so I felt pretty good about that. This next page, I think is kind of nice for showing my progression that you'll see in some later sketchbook tours. But I've always been interested in big cats and found them really beautiful and interesting. So I was trying to draw a panther here. This was definitely from memory without a reference, and yeah, you can see this is pretty bleak. But there's lots more big cats to come in these sketchbooks, so I think I'd like to say I've redeemed myself at least a little bit. I've got a nice little coffee cup here and an AirPods case. I remember really distinctly this was a Sunday morning, and when I was living with a house full of boys, and we'd make a big Folgers batch of coffee every morning, and it was super strong, but yeah, good memory. Here we're getting into July of 2022, so 2 months after I started the sketchbook. Got a nice little drawing of Luffy there. I think that's from the volume 100 cover art for any of my other nerds out there. And then I've got a really horrible drawing of Ace from One Piece here that I left half finished. Yeah, this was definitely definitely without a reference. You can see the ear here is just massive. The face proportions are all over the place. Yeah, this is one as soon as I started drawing it out that I knew was not going quite right. So, you know, sometimes that happens, you know, sometimes it's, you'll start a drawing and it's just not really working for you, and you kind of need to move on to something new. This is one of my favorite pages actually in this sketchbook. I've just always really liked how this doodle here came out in this kind of mushroomy organic design sprouting up. I always thought that was kind of nice. And then on the right here is a picture of Porter, my dog, which actually is my YouTube avatar, at least for right now, until I come up with something better to make it. But yeah, Porter is the best dog ever. He's so sweet. So I tried doing him justice here with a little pencil drawing that I actually think came out really well and captured just how cute and sweet he is. This next drawing, this was supposed to be a full color spread from One Piece. Eiichiro Oda, the author of One Piece, is an excellent artist and will do these big pages that have all of the different characters, all the different Straw Hats, watercolored, and, you know, they're just really fun and detailed to look at. So my original vision for this was to try and copy a whole color spread of his and have all of the characters here in the background, but I only got so far as drawing Sanji here. But for one of my first forays into using watercolor, this actually doesn't look too horrible. You know, there's definitely some bleeding, but I was pretty happy with kind of the pastel style of this, so that was kind of nice. Got a okay little drawing of a motorcycle there. This definitely was something off of like Pinterest. Not a bad drawing. And onto a bad drawing. This, you know, not so humble of me, was supposed to be a self-portrait, but definitely inspired by Eren in Attack on Titan. Um, and yeah, just some really, really poor proportions here that make this drawing really not work. Really long torso, really skinny, short legs, and yeah, this coat, I was trying to have it be kind of flowy and open. I didn't really understand at this point how to draw clothing that looked believable, so I gave up on this drawing relatively quickly. This was from another One Piece color spread. I drew Brook, the crew's musician, and pretty simple drawing. Not a whole lot to say about it, but I like to skateboard in my free time, and this logo here is from a skateboarding brand called Bones, which I thought was pretty funny because Brook's a skeleton, and that's the kind of humor I think you'd find funny. So I kind of liked that. I've got up next a drawing of Asa from Chainsaw Man Part 2. And yeah, this is this was definitely looking at a reference, but still came out pretty poorly. She's kind of looking like a hammerhead shark or something, with her eyes super far apart, no nose. That was, an inspired decision for sure. But I do kind of like how her hair came out. I think it's kind of, it's got the messiness that I think reflects her character well. So even if that was unintentional, I kind of like the detail that adds. Next up, I've got another kind of, self-portrait again. I'm just drawing people with shaggy hair and saying they look like me. But this was supposed to be kind of a self-insert of myself into the Bleach world, or the Bleach art style. And I really like this drawing. The cross-hatching is a little intense, and a little poorly done. But I think, the body proportions are a lot better this time. I like the shoulder muscles and how they kind of connected to the bicep, I think is, relatively correct. It has the right idea, at least. And whatever kind of weapon this is pretty fun. I like this little chain, and I could see this being a Bleach character, and, my Bleach character would definitely get beaten up by Ichigo pretty quickly, I think. Got another Chainsaw Man Part 2 drawing here of Asa. I love her character. She's one of my favorite characters, but yeah, this is a really rough drawing to look back on. It's definitely trying to, I remember trying to be really intentional with my cross-hatching and shading, as you can see, and I just went way overboard here. I had no understanding of what I was doing, and yeah, this one could have maybe been saved without me going quite so hard on the cross-hatching, but it ends up looking pretty messy. This next page is definitely one of my least favorites in this sketchbook, I think. I had another face that was originally drawn on here, and I remember really hating it and like trying to scribble to cover it up. So you can see there's definitely like some layered mouths and weirdness going on here. And I will say I actually do like the current drawing more than whatever the hell was there before, but I don't think that's really saying too much. And then here, this was definitely inspired by mecha anime, or I don't know. I've always just kind of liked machinery and been interested in how things go together. But I don't really have much of an engineer's brain, so, you can see I had some ideas, but it's a weird propeller wheel. I don't know. There's no kind of connective tissue for this that makes sense. All right, moving on. This is in the thumbnail. This is one of my favorite sketches in this sketchbook. And I think this is just a much better example of kind of the sketchy doodly style that I like to do. That and this is, I think, much more representative of a better version of that. I really like these strong lines that kind of carry throughout the piece. And just a lot of the details that kind of make it pop of, there's these eyeballs here and the mouth and this chain kind of going around. You know, I think it's another testament to with big sketchy pieces like this, if you don't quite like how they're coming along, of just add more, you know, get more ink on the page, and you know, kind of just creates a little more visual intrigue or leads the eye in an interesting way. But looking at this compared to well, let's see if I can find it, my early page of this kind of scribbly doodle, you know, I think there's a lot of improvement that you can see. And another one of my favorite drawings in this sketchbook, this is again Guts from Berserk, and this is definitely copied from one of my favorite panels in the manga, but for how detailed it is, I think it actually came out pretty well for the most part. I really love the texture of this wood and of Guts' pants here, you know. I think that's pretty well done. The torso is a little bit funky, definitely in the arms. And then this nose has always driven me crazy. But yeah, all in all, I think this came together really well and just looks really complete and full as a page. So I'm pretty happy with it for that. This is kind of a nothing drawing. Again, I mentioned I live in Portland, so this was sitting at the Selwood riverfront. So this is a river here and Sandy Beach, and there's some houses on the other side, but yeah, it never quite got off the ground. Don't know what I was doing with this page. I guess I drew this one line here and decided that I was giving up on it and it was irredeemable. So who knows? Maybe I'll come back and make something out of this at some point. I remember this being a really frustrating page to work on. I think in this first sketchbook, I still really had the philosophy of I'd get really frustrated if I drew something that I didn't like. And I think now, being, you know, halfway through the sketchbook, I was really proud of my progress. But it made it kind of hurt when I would add something to the sketchbook that I really hated and, you know, didn't want to flip past every time. So I remember I was on my lunch break at work, sitting in my car, and I tried sketching Ichigo from Bleach here. I really hated how this came out. Tried doing it again in a, you know, different pen, different style. Also hated it. So then I went home after that work day and drew another character from Bleach. I don't remember who this is, but yeah. And then this one I think is actually much better, but, you know, still not amazing. But I like this Eren from Attack on Titan down here okay. His face is a little weird, but this page doesn't really bother me as much anymore. I think, first of all, I'm just a lot less harsh on myself for having drawings that I don't like, and, you know, that's what a sketchbook is for, is to practice and to, you know, not be afraid, you know, putting the pen to the paper and making something happen. But again, I think actually just, if I would have left it just this really ugly Ichigo here, I think I would have disliked this page a lot more. But just by filling it up, it just gives you a lot more to look at and, you know, makes me appreciate it more. This was also supposed to be, again, quote-unquote self-portrait. They're all very different, but, you know, really just anyone with brown, shaggy hair I was calling myself. This was definitely inspired by kind of a mix-up of Eren from Attack on Titan and Kurapika from Hunter x Hunter. You can see his pretty badass, you know, chain jewelry hand thing here. And I think this turned out pretty well. I really love how blue this suit is. You can tell I was really going hard with the colored pencils here and, you know, just like grinding them into the page. But, you know, the face and the hair definitely could have, I think, could have been executed a little bit better. But all in all, not a bad drawing. This was just a random sketch. This was, again, on a lunch break at the job I was working at the time. I actually think this anatomy is not horrible. I actually kind of like the way this shoulder droops and drops in here. I don't know. I think after the head's kind of shaped like an egg, and then I added in the cross necklace here. I'm not religious at all, but I feel like it kind of makes this look like a Christian rapper or something, you know, about drop some hot bars about the Lord being the good shepherd or something. I've got Levi here from Attack on Titan. Decent drawing. I don't have a whole lot to say about it. You know, this was definitely looking at a reference, and, you know, okay execution. The eyes are a little funky, but, you know, I was taking a stab here, adding some small shading, and I think it turned out all right. Next up is a really exciting page, actually. You know, there's not too much going on, just kind of scribbly again. But I got some new pens on this day. And if you're at all like me, getting new pens is always a reason to celebrate. But I remember specifically, it was my first time trying these zebra brush pens, which I think are Japanese. But I love these pens. They've kind of become my go-to. So this was kind of a big moment where, even though this page doesn't feel super special, I remember it was my first time getting to try out those pens, and, you know, I've gone on to use them in tons and tons of drawings. I think this is a kind of important step in this sketchbook where I remember, I think this was just from memory, or, you know, not looking at a reference, and kind of the positioning of this chair and the legs here is kind of telling me that I couldn't have been looking at something, because it's definitely a little wonky. But yeah, this definitely was an original character design, and I really like how it turned out. You know, it's got a lot of fun features like the big anime hair, and I love all of the accessories like the chain and the, you know, the customized pants. These shoes are pretty dope. So I don't know, I think this was a really good step for, you know, getting comfortable coming up with character designs of my own, you know, taking a lot more agency in my drawings, and not just trying to copy from things that I like. But yeah, definitely looking at things like this hand here, I can tell that, you know, I definitely was struggling a little bit. This one doesn't look too bad, actually. But yeah, really nice drawing overall. Definitely happy with that one. At the same time I got these zebra pens, I got a fountain pen and was trying it out here for the first time. And definitely had a learning curve. These are all one-piece characters. And yeah, Nami here particularly is looking pretty rough. But I think, you know, this practice page was really helpful, because I remember my next drawing was also with the same fountain pen, and I drew this one-piece character here. I don't remember the character's name, but was just like a minor villain. But I think this came out really wonderfully. And again, all credit goes to Oda for the character design. But I love the big spiky hair, and how all of the details on his coat and outfit came out here. You know, just, I think this is a lot of fun, and I like how stark the blacks are on this piece a lot. So super happy with this one. And then this next page, you know, I think this shows no matter how good of an artist you are, you know, you'll have good days where things just seem to work out, and bad days where feels like nothing can go right. I mean, I remember being really frustrated by this drawing. This is another one-piece character, and yeah, you can definitely see there's multiple jaw lines up here that I tried to just scribble in. Really strange body proportions. Yeah, just, I remember nothing on this one was quite feeling right. Okay, I've got a pretty simple sketch here. I remember at this point I wanted to practice drawing women a little bit more, because it's a pretty male-dominated sketchbook up to this point. So this was definitely just some woman off of Pinterest doing an outfit pose. It's not horrible. You know, her face shape here I think is kind of weird. But I like whatever glasses she had on, these big Harry Potter glasses. So, you know, not a whole lot to say about it, but okay. I think this is a super fun drawing. I'm a big fan of the BioShock video games, and this is I really love how this Big Daddy turned out. Pretty fun shading with the zebra pens of, you know, messing around with the gray ink and trying to give it some texture. The little sister here definitely looks a little bit weird. You know, her head is absolutely massive compared to the rest of her body. But all in all, it kind of adds to the, you know, the creepy feel of it all. So I'm not too upset about it. I've got a pretty poor drawing of Power from Chainsaw Man here. This was, again, trying to get better at drawing women, and yeah, just like all of these lines are so jagged and, you know, just has no confidence in the lines. I can tell that I went over these a bunch with the pen, and yeah, you can tell that this was not super well planned out. I've got a lot of appreciation for this page, even though it's unfinished. Drew some One Piece characters up there. That was definitely with the fountain pen. Law and Nami are looking pretty funny, but I like Luffy and Frankie here. And then down below, I was using the brush pens to sketch out some of the characters. So we've got Nami looking really cool here with kind of a military setup. You know, she's got weapons and shit. And then there's a sketch out here for Sanji, but as you can see, I never finished inking him out, but yeah, I think that was pretty fun. I've got a nice drawing of Zoro here. I remember drawing this one because I was waiting to get on the bus. So I was just sitting at the bus stop, you know, and grabbed my sketchbook and pens and busted this out super quick. So this was definitely just from memory. You can tell with the hand is always the giveaway, but yeah, I think there might be one too many fingers there in the first place. But all in all, I think the kind of composition of having the, you know, the face here and the different profiles turned out pretty well. And I really remember this because I was sitting at the bus stop and then my bus pulled up and I'm horribly unprepared with pens and, you know, my sketchbook out, and I had to rush to get on and apologize to the driver. Oh, excuse me. A lot of talking here. I'm not used to it. Little original character here. It's okay. He's supposed to be some kind of Arctic fisherman, sort of bounty hunter type thing with the cowboy hat, and this is supposed to be like a harpoon gun here. So I like his face here and his gun, but yeah, the rest of the drawing is pretty flat. You know, you can definitely tell this was just from imagination. Really shitty Law drawing there from One Piece, and some more of those Kurapika chains there. I'm really fascinated by those, so you'll see a lot of them. I've got a drawing here of Corazon from One Piece. I like how this came out. This is with that fountain pen, and you know, you can kind of tell it's a little sketchy, but fun posture. And then some nice kind of hand studies here with hands holding cigarettes. I actually like how all of these came out. For whatever reason, I was drawing hands really well this day, just with a ballpoint pen, but yeah, I really like all of those. I was drawing some faces from One Piece here. I was definitely reading the Dressrosa arc, so if any of you are familiar, that's why there's so many of these repeating characters. But yeah, these are, it's fine. I mean, a lot of the shading here is pretty over the top, or, you know, not super well done, but, you know, not the worst drawing by any means. I've got some quick little Chainsaw Man sketches. These were definitely looking at a panel, but I remember busting these out pretty quick, so I like kind of how dynamic they are, and kind of, you know, using simple lines here to try and get the character shape down. So, you know, I think this was a good practice page, even if it's, you know, not the most impressive. I remember this guy I was trying to draw in Fujimoto style. He's the author of Chainsaw Man. While this character looks kind of funky, I think this actually does okay at representing the style. And I've got just a random bird and cat here. Don't know exactly where I got those from. I've got a drawing of Quan Chi here from Chainsaw Man, and I love her character. She's super badass, but I have never really liked this drawing. this is just a real example of needing some shading or some kind of dynamic going on, because I just look at this and it's just so flat and lifeless. And I feel like it really highlights some of the areas where, you know, the head shape is kind of weird, you know, the proportions are kind of strange, and you know, by it being so kind of plain, it really kind of brings those things to the forefront. This was supposed to be just like a little doodle of kind of a, you know, a Japanese scroll or something with, you know, a big like willow tree here with some blossoms or leaves in the wind, you know, kind of Starry Night-esque. It's fine. I don't have a whole lot to say about it. Oh boy, we are now getting into a very rough part of the sketchbook where I was in a real slump. This was the middle of winter in 2022, 2023, and yeah, there's just a big string of drawings in a row that I really dislike. This was supposed to be a self-portrait again. Yeah, it makes it especially especially hard to swallow that this was supposed to be me. But yeah, this was pretty ugly. We've got another drawing of Ace here from One Piece. You know, simple, but it just does not look like Ace. You know, I think another example of not quite understanding the proportions correctly. This was supposed to be, you know, I think this one I remember just drawing not from reference. You can see kind of the sketches where I was trying to figure out her body positioning. But I actually like the idea of this one. She was supposed to be like some kind of like vampire hunter, librarian, sort of Victorian, I don't know, type thing. But yeah, this cane sword is a pretty fun idea. She's supposed to have a gun here. I like these glasses, but yeah, the drawing itself is a good idea. Poor execution for sure. Just kind of a page of random doodles. Don't really have a whole lot to say on this. I definitely at the time, I remember watching a YouTube video of Kim Jung-ji, he was a really fantastic artist, and he was, you know, giving a YouTube tutorial on how to draw guns from different perspectives, and I thought it was really interesting. So you'll see a lot of guns in the next couple pages, even though I'm not the biggest gun person myself. I've always thought the way that they, you know, all of the parts go together and the way that they work is pretty interesting. So you can see some more of that there. And this Mac 10 looks pretty cool, actually. But yeah, some of these are, yeah, I can't even tell what that's supposed to be. Some kind of shotgun, maybe. Yeah, another bad gun drawing here. You know, these hands are definitely some sausage fingers, and you can tell I gave up on trying to draw a person here holding the gun. I was a little intimidated by that, but yeah, that was the fascination at this time, was trying to draw guns, and these were some pretty poor examples. This was a drawing. I don't know if this is from Chainsaw Man or my own creation, but I can tell instantly from the big anime hair, the scars, the suit, and the cigarette. That's kind of classic Chainsaw Man. But whether this was me or something copied from Fujimoto, I really like how this one came out, actually. I think she looks pretty cool there. This drawing, I was in an airport, I remember, for at least this guy. This guy, for whatever reason, I remember really staring at him and trying to get his side profile. So sorry to that guy. But yeah, these are another one of my least favorite pages in this sketchbook. This was definitely trying to get better at drawing faces from memory, and I think the only two I really think are okay is this kind of a cool guy here, and this librarian again, who you know, looks kind of like out of a comic book or something like that. But yeah, the rest of these are pretty bleak. I remember being on a plane when I drew this, so these pages definitely went together. You know, this was supposed to be some kind of mecha suit or something, but again, you know, you can see there's some cooling tubes going to nothing, or, you know, I was definitely inspired to draw kind of machinery, but didn't have the best sense on how to kind of put things together. Okay. Another drawing at the airport. I think this was probably on the layover. Drew some dude sitting in a chair. It's pretty cool, you know. This guy's famous for being in, you know, Jeff's YouTube channel now. So if this is you, shout out. This was also during the layover, you know, just kind of a random little doodle. Not a whole lot to say about it, but I do like how this spiked moon shape came out there. I think that's kind of fun, but yeah, other than that, actually this flower's not too bad with the roots there. I remember this drawing, so now I can kind of place it, which is funny that I'm getting the memory now. I was in Colorado visiting Chloe. Chloe's my girlfriend, over winter break. So we were up in a little mountain town. This was at a really cute coffee shop, and I was drawing Jin from Samurai Champloo. And I think both of these are pretty badass. You know, I was definitely looking at something, but yeah, I think, you know, I captured his kind of slender features well, and yeah, the hair blowing in the wind there is pretty sweet. Drawing of Zorro, this was definitely still in Colorado. I remember laying in bed drawing this and sketching this out and being like, oh, it's a mess. I have to give up on it. Which is really funny because I'd like barely started, so I don't know what I was freaking out over, but you know, I'm sure if any of you draw, you can understand that sometimes things just don't feel right, and it can get frustrating quickly if it's just not clicking for whatever reason. I've got a really fun drawing here of Sanji from One Piece. I remember, you know, this was around the winter time, and I'd gotten a new fountain pen for Christmas, and this was my first time trying it out. And I really love how this came out. You know, I think his leg here on fire is captured pretty well, and I like how dynamic his hair is. Really fun drawing, I think. You know, I remember being really happy with this one at the time. Definitely using that same fountain pen here. Pretty sketchy, just little samurai dude, but I actually think this has kind of some cool motion to it, and I think the sketchiness kind of helps this drawing more than it hurts it. These were some anime boy faces, except for this guy here. He kind of looks like an accountant or something. Really love these two faces, actually. For whatever reason, I just think their expressions are really fascinating, and however I did the hair here, I really like, and I have always really liked this drawing. And I really like just, you know, somehow randomly drawing this guy, the emotion, it feels like, really comes across in his expression, which is something I still really struggle with, is drawing expression into characters. So I guess this time it just seemed to work out, but I've always thought that these two were both really good. This is when I was visiting Chloe in Italy. She was studying abroad in Siena for 6 months, or I guess like 4 or 5. But I went out to visit her for a couple of weeks. This was March of 2023. And we were on a train to Naples. So I tried drawing her here in the train seat. She's much more beautiful than this. I didn't do her justice with this drawing, but you know, it was an okay drawing from life. And then of course Chloe then drew me, and it looks much better. She's a fantastic artist, which can be a little frustrating sometimes because she's wonderful. But yeah, it was a nice little drawing of me then on the train, so we can have a nice little comparison there. This was just a really lovely memory. I've got some just clippings here from tickets that we went to. You know, these were some museums in Florence. And this was kind of my first little idea of starting to do some scrapbooking and put that into the sketchbook. And then this drawing here was on the balcony of the Airbnb that we were staying at. And we are on the Amalfi Coast. So this right here is the Mediterranean Sea. And it was just right there. It was so cool. So this was, you know, the little skinny alleyway that took us out there in the buildings. And I just remember sitting out there in the sun, and, you know, it was springtime, so it felt great to be outside. And I was drinking some coffee and listening to In Rainbows by Radiohead for the first time. So it was like a great experience, you know, but I really have this day much etched into my memory. I drew this at a train station in Italy. This is Luffy looking pretty content with himself. I think that was from a panel. Then this is the last drawing in the sketchbook. I'll bring it up a little bit because it's a bit hard to see. But I got this shitty blue pen in the gift shop there. And then this was actually at probably 3 or 4 a.m. in the airport in Florence. I had tried staying in the airport and seeing if I could sneak in and sleep there so I could catch my early morning flight. And pro tip, they lock everyone out of the airport in Italy, so you can't just spend the night there. So I was hanging out with this homeless dude and doodling here. So this was, yeah, like 4 a.m. outside of the airport. So kind of fun memory associated with it. And, you know, not a whole lot to say about the drawing, but more memorable experience than anything. That is the end of this sketchbook. As we can see, this is March of 2023. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. Bye.